This is Mid-Atlantic Women in Agriculture's Wednesday webinar, Creating a Farm Marketing Kit. Our presenter today is Kim Rush Lynch, Agriculture Marketing Specialist at University of Maryland Extension. A special thank you to our sponsors, Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit, Delaware Department of Agriculture, and Maryland Department of Agriculture. All downloads and videos discussed during the presentation can be found at our website. And any questions can be sent directly to Kim's email provided at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Shannon and Victoria, for inviting me to speak with this group today. I'm going to chat a little bit about how you can effectively engage your audience with marketing collateral. So essentially creating a farm marketing kit. Just to give you guys a little bit of background about me, I've pretty much been involved with food my entire life. I worked on an organic farm. I also directed a youth and community gardening program at the National Arboretum. I was still am a small business owner. I have a health coaching business, and I used to do corporate wellness programs. I'm also very involved with my local farmers market, helped start that. So I, kind of understand that perspective as well in terms of marketing. And I also worked with the local food co-op doing some of their marketing. And it's kind of funny because I always thought to myself, I don't know how I feel about marketing. Marketing was just an icky word for me, and I think for a lot of folks that is the case. So someone once told me to stop thinking about it as marketing and start thinking about it as connecting or educating. So I just wanted to throw that out to you all. So when you feel, a little bit challenged in that area, you can think of it that way. What's that saying they have? You can toot your own horn without blowing it. So that's it's kind of how I like to think about marketing. So think about it as connecting and educating. So moving on to the rest of the presentation, essentially your marketing kit should complement your major goals, and it's a strategy for implementing your overall marketing plan. When we talk about collateral, those are some of the items we'll be speaking about today. It's essentially a collection of media that you use to support the sales of your product or your service. So before we actually get into the marketing kit, let's see, my page down button's not working so well here. Let's try this again. We want to talk a little about what your niche is. How do you differentiate yourself from the competition? And we're also going to talk a little about how you gauge what your target market might be, a little bit about imaging. All those sorts of things are going to help build your marketing kit. Also, if you believe in your product or service, it's much easier to market it, and that's why it's fun to kind of figure out what your niche is going to be. And it could be something that you feel that you do best, but I think the most important thing is that it's something that you enjoy doing best. Oftentimes we're good at something in particular, but maybe it's not what we're most passionate about, so it's nice if you can combine both of those. You also want to look at how your farm business complements another business, whether it's another farm business or not. It could be a complementary business. It's always good to have a referral network. Sorry, and for whatever reason, my page down is not working, so we're just going to scroll here. Okay, so consider your image first. What type of image are you looking to portray to your customers? A huge component of marketing is your image. And you really want to try to appeal to your particular target market. And we'll talk about what the target market is in a moment. Also, how does your farm operation align with this image that you're trying to portray? Does it even align? And if it doesn't, what images or what changes do you need to make in order to sync up with your desired image? This then leads into something that we're going to talk about in a moment called a positioning statement. And I'm giving you an example here. Wheaties, their positioning statement is the breakfast of champions. So, their image, of course, is this athlete that they use on their box to kind of help to complement that image. So that's just an idea of when we're talking about image, and in the next section, positioning statements, something that we're looking for. We want the image of your farm to line up with what it is that you do, of course, but also whatever philosophy or, other things that you want to be portraying to your particular audience. So when you're developing your positioning statement, you're going to ask yourself a few questions. First, this is very basic. What does your farm business do? That's the first simple step here. Also, what needs does it meet, and what problems is it trying to solve? You also want to think about how your customers benefit psychologically from your particular service or your product. And also, how does your farm business differ from the competition, as we mentioned earlier when we were talking about your niche? There's a couple of things for you to consider in terms of figuring out what might separate you apart from the rest. And these items could be included within your positioning statement. Some of those things are services that you provide. It might be that you have a pick-your-own operation, or you have a CSA, some other value-added type opportunity that your farm business does. So that would be one thing. Another thing could be a philosophy, and this generally is linked to one's growing practices. So perhaps you have a particular type of growing practice that you're really feeling strongly about, and that's something that you might want to include in your positioning statement. Another thing is specialization. You might be someone who is just really into heirloom tomatoes and you want to promote that. Or maybe you're someone who likes to raise heritage breed pork. So all these kinds of things can also help to differentiate you and develop your positioning statement. And finally, something that we often forget about is location. Sometimes it may be a location of convenience. For example, if you may be an urban agriculture operation, but it also may be that you have a beautiful location, if you're in a beautiful rural setting. So this is something that a lot of our farms obviously can leverage. So be sure to consider those kinds of things when you're developing your positioning statement. Once you develop this positioning statement, you kind of want to, toss it around to some folks, evaluate it, and ask yourself, does it convey a true benefit? Does it differentiate you from your competition, and is it unique? And I have a couple of examples for you. I threw one up here that I found of a farm that I thought was kind of clever. This is from Mossback Farm, and it's grass-fed beef, the new old-fashioned way. So that does convey something unique about their product. And it can be a true benefit if you're someone who really believes in grass-fed beef, and also can differentiate you from your competition. So this would be an example of a good positioning statement. Some other ones that are not maybe related to the agriculture industry are, for example, Avis. They have a positioning statement of, we're Avis, we're number one, we try harder. And I thought that was pretty clever because, they're competing with number one, Hertz, but they're making the statement that they're trying harder. That's something that makes them unique. You have something like 7-Up. They call themselves the Uncola, for example. And so that's a way that they differentiate themselves from, their counterparts, the colas, the Cokes and the Pepsis. And then NyQuil, of course, they have one that's a really good example of conveying a true benefit. Their nighttime sniffling, sneezing, coughing, aching, stuffy head fever so you can rest medicine. So these are just some examples of positioning statements that help to push the product and, target a market. Another way of looking at a positioning statement also is a tagline or a slogan, but this is something that's a little bit more thoughtful, and you're really using this exercise to target a market. So before I move on to a target market exercise, do we have any questions? Okay, I see someone's typing. We'll continue on, and I will come right on back to it. Okay, so when you're defining your target market, there's a little bit of analysis that we need to do. First of all, you got to think about certain demographics and also certain psychographics, and I've listed a few examples here. And I have an exercise that will break this down a little bit better for you, but this is just a quick snapshot of some things that you should consider. The age, the income level, occupation, gender, geographic location, education level, all of these things, may play into who you want to target for your particular product or service. The other thing would be a psychographic analysis. What sort of special interest activities or hobbies do your potential clients have? What sort of philosophical beliefs do they have? What sort of social factors are involved here? What kinds of things do they like to do in terms of, cultural involvements in their communities? The other thing is, folks may have a particular food, health, or medical need that they need to attend to. So these are some other things that you can consider when doing your target market analysis. And we're going to head on into what a target market exercise could look like for you. And as Shannon said, this is going to be recorded, so you can come back to these questions, or if you send me an email, I'll give you my email at the very end. if you send me an email, I should say. I will include my email at the end, and you can send me a little note, and I can send this back to you as well. And I can even give you some feedback if that's helpful. So again, going back to the earlier slide, we're going to be looking at age range, the average age of your customers. What percentage of your customers are male versus female? What is their average educational level? Where do they live? What occupation do they have? What particular companies are they working with? What's their, what do they like to read? And also, where do they like to play? Where do they pray? What special interest groups are they members of? What attitudes and beliefs about food and farming do they hold? Also, what are your customers' needs, concerns, and goals? That's a huge thing, because one of the things that we're trying to do is to match up your customer's need with what you can provide, or you're trying to match up, I should say the other way around. You have a service to provide, and you want to target those customers that need that particular service. Also, what is the primary reason that your customers are using your services? And there may be some other reasons they're using your services. So make sure to list all of those and think about all of those, but really, narrow in on that first primary reason, because you want to make sure you're hitting that. What is the average amount of contact you have with your customers? That's going to be important when we talk about how we're going to reach them. And also, who else is serving your customers? That's important too, because again, I mentioned earlier, you may want to set up a little bit of a referral network, and you want to talk to other people, because it's great to have other people talking about the benefits of your particular product. Okay, so now that you've asked those questions, then you may want to, this is a fun exercise that you can do, and this really just helps you hone in on what your typical customer is like. So you can create this exercise. This only, took me like 10 minutes after I made up some answers to my own questions. This is the profile of a typical customer. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this to you. My typical customer is a 42-year-old working mom who is interested in buying quality food for her family. Galusha purchases food with limited chemical inputs because her child has food allergies. According to her holistic pediatrician, they can be exacerbated by too much chemical exposure. While she enjoys patronizing her local farmers market, Galusha is considering becoming a CSA member if she can find one that's a one-stop shop with a wide range of products, particularly veggies, meats, and eggs, because she doesn't have time to shop. Galusha reads Edible DC and Eating Well magazines, Food 52 blog, and enjoys watching Maryland Farm and Harvest and The Chew when she has time. She is a serial Facebook poster and loves to share recipes, health articles, and memes with cute farm animals. She has a small vegetable and herb garden, mainly full of weeds, and enjoys cooking. Although she enjoys cooking, she dines out once a week and prefers restaurants serving fare with local ingredients. Having said that, the Chipotle restaurant crew knows her by name. So this is just something to think about. So you kind of get an overall picture of what your typical customer may look like. And it's okay if you don't, if you're just starting out and maybe you don't have a typical customer, then you may want to just think about what your ideal customer might look like. That can also be helpful. But there's a few things in here that I mentioned. One thing, for example, is, she's a serial Facebook poster. So when we get to the social media section of your marketing kit, that may be where you want to spend your energy. She loves to share recipes. So when you're posting on Facebook, you may want to post some, recipes. Also, her age may tell you something about, if you do some studies in terms of where 42-year-olds are spending their time. There's maybe certain publications. I'd mentioned she likes Edible DC and Eating Well magazine. So those may be places where you may find yourself advertising. Let's see, what else? Again, she enjoys Chipotle food, so, oftentimes Chipotle has, message boards and things like that. So, if you can create a profile of your customer, that will help you figure out where it is that you need to market your product and services. Okay, so do we have any questions about that before we get into marketing channels? All right. Well, now that you have your positioning statement and your target markets identified, it's important for us to consider some of the marketing channels that are available to us and what might be important to those folks in those particular marketing channels. We got a question here. Do you create more than one? If you're in terms of positioning statements, yes, you may want to do that. So depending on the target market that you're trying to create, you may have a different positioning statement. Generally, it's best to try and choose one that you can use over and over again, but you might have we're going to talk about in a little bit how you may have different elements from your marketing kit that you will use at different times and for different purposes. So we'll speak a little bit more about that. But generally, I think your positioning statement, you should have one in general that people can identify with. But some people, choose to have variations of those, depending on who they're speaking with. Okay, so we're going to talk about some direct and indirect opportunities for marketing. For example, some of you may be doing more direct opportunities such as, your CSAs, your pick your own operations, farmers markets. And it's really important to think about what is important to that particular clientele. For direct marketing, oftentimes the customer experience is key. What are they going to experience when they come up to your booth at the farmers market? What are they going to experience when they come to your farm? How is their CSA box packaged? So those are some things to keep in mind when you're working with direct marketing. Also, quality and taste. For all of these, quality and taste are going to be very important. But this is something that's, I think, particularly important to the direct market folks. Growing and production practices are often very important. Some people don't, they're not as concerned. They're just really wanting to associate their food with a face. But other people have particular production and livestock practices that they are interested in seeing from the folks that are growing their food. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is convenience can be important to some folks. Some people are happy to come out to your farm. Some people may want a drop-off that's more convenient to where they work or where they live. So these are some things to keep in mind when you're working with more direct outlets. In terms of some indirect outlets, of course, retail outlets are huge. There's a lot of local health food stores and specialty shops that are offering local food. So they're willing to put your product out because there's a demand for it. So we'll talk a little bit about how the marketing kit down the road. We'll talk about how the marketing kit would align with the retail outlets. Gourmet grocers, of course. Some traditional grocery stores, or actually I should say many traditional grocery stores, are now looking to source local. So having a marketing kit to push yourself in their particular arena would be very important. Same with restaurants and caterers. Eating locally is a very hot item right now, and I'm hoping it won't go away. So this is a great time to pull that marketing kit together to reach these particular folks. What are these folks looking for? Again, growing production and practices, and in many cases, food safety is going to be very important to them, although maybe not as important as in some other areas. It really just depends, but I think generally food safety is becoming more and more important, so that's something that you're going to consider when creating your marketing kit. Quality and taste, of course. Many of these health food stores, for example, and even some of the specialty shops and even traditional grocers, they're really looking at the health benefits too. They want to be able to tell their customers that they should buy this particular item because of its health benefits. Also, pricing and packaging is going to be important to them, especially if you're doing some type of value-added product. They're going to want to see the packaging, and ask a series of questions. Is it attractive? Will it fit with their particular display, where their shelf space, where they have room for it? Does it need to be frozen? All these sorts of things are going to play into what they're looking for and what they have room for. So it's good to be very clear about that, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Another group you may find yourself connecting with are grower cooperatives and groups. And again, they're going to be looking at pricing. That's going to be important. I've spoken with some growing cooperatives that they're really interested in their product has to have a certain brix level in order for them to work with you. Again, they're going to be looking more for consistency. They'll be concerned about packaging and prepping as well, because it needs to, if they're helping to aggregate this, it needs to be easy for them. Shipping too, are you going to be able to deliver to them? Is it easily shipped? Not all of them are going to obviously be able to come out to you, so they're going to want to know how that's going to work, and we'll get into some details a little bit later about that when we talk about wholesalers. And then some of them are going to be concerned about food safety. I've talked with some others that aren't as concerned, but I think this is going to be a more popular request as time goes on. You also may be creating a marketing kit specifically for wholesale, distributors and institutions in particular. they're going to want to know some of the same things that we had talked about before, but I will say here, this is where food safety certifications are going to be very important. So that's something to think about. And if you're not quite there yet, it may not be that you can work with these folks. It just depends. You have to check with the specific distributor or institution to see if that works for them. The other thing that's going to be important for them is delivery and payment terms. You're going to need to be specific about how that's going to work, and they're going to want to know what's required of them, and it may be a little bit of a negotiation, but that's something that you should be prepared to discuss. And finally, another place where you can market your products are online food hub platforms. We have a lot of them in our area. I'm in Maryland, relayfoods.com, and we have Chesapeake Farm to Table. There are two kind of different examples. There's a food hub in Columbia called, Friends and Farms, and I'm sure you all have very similar operations in your areas. Again, some of the same things are going to be applicable if you're trying to target those particular platforms. So I just wanted to mention that. And these are online food hubs are another format if you don't have the opportunity to work with a distributor per se. So now that we have gone through all of that, I'd like to get into the meat of it, which is the marketing kit. That's why you all are here. But I just wanted to make sure everyone, understood the homework that you need to do ahead of time, the things that you need to think about and consider before you actually spend time, energy, and even money into developing a marketing kit. So before I move on, are there any questions? Okay. So marketing kit is about developing your unique style and voice. Why bother creating a marketing kit? Well, there's a couple of very good reasons for that. One, it displays a certain level of professionalism for your farm business, which then will give you more credibility. It also helps to give you a consistent look and feel to give your customers a sense of who you are. They will recognize you when they start to see your branding, and you want them to have that level of association. It also helps to define a clear and consistent message in terms of what niche you're able to provide and what you're able to give your customers. The nice thing about marketing kits is they can be tailored to a variety of audiences. I'll talk about a lot of pieces today, but you may not use all of them, or you might just, you may use all of them, but maybe not all at the same time. It just depends on what you're trying to do. Also, marketing kits are a call to action, which then translates to business and, of course, money in your pocket, which is the goal. It also demonstrates why customers need you. We're going to discuss a little bit later how it's more important to show the benefits of your product and not just the features of your product or service. Oftentimes we like to list everything that we do, and that's great, but what really appeals to customers is how will those features benefit you. So you need to turn those features that you have into some type of benefit, and that will take your marketing plan to another level. The other thing is it saves you time in the end. Oftentimes opportunities will pop up really quickly, and you need to be able to respond. So if an opportunity does arise, you can have your marketing kit ready to go, and you can just pull the pieces that you need. So what are some basic elements of a marketing kit? Well, first of all, there's a cover letter that can often go with your marketing kit. And that would be something that you would actually use if you were going to approach one of those marketing channels that I described, the institution, maybe a health food store, a restaurant or caterer. It's often nice to have a tailored cover letter, and we're going to, in a little bit, go into what those, what kinds of things you would want to include in a cover letter. A business card or a postcard is a must, I would say. Although I know people are getting a little bit, business carded out, I think it's still a really important thing to hand out to your clients or your potential customers. Again, it's going to include your branding, which is something that you want to make sure that you're getting out there, because you know what, we're inundated with images all day long, so it's great when you have something visual to connect, you with your farm business. Fact sheets are great to have about your products. Also a farm profile. You want to tell your story. It's great if you can offer free food samples, and perhaps other incentives or even a rewards program. Talk about that in a moment. A logo obviously is very important. Products, services, and a price list. And that would include your delivery and payment terms, which is very important. Recipes, people want to know what to do with your product. And this is not just at the direct level, if you're at a farmer's market or with your CSA shares, but also, if you are working with a health food store, they're going to want to know how they can pass along to their customers how to use your product. Also, you may want to offer to do an in-store demo. That is actually appealing to a lot of health food stores, and as someone who worked for a local food co-op, I did a lot of food demos, and I could help sell the product, but honestly, it was much better when we had a representative from that particular company come, because they know all the ins and outs of it, and you're kind of giving that information secondhand if you're someone that's just working at the store doing the particular demo. But if you can pull in the person who's actually producing the product and who's really super passionate about it, you'll have a better chance of upping your sales, so to speak. So offering to do store demos, I think, are welcomed by a lot of grocery stores and health food stores. Obviously, including recipes is very important. People want to know how to use the product. And any testimonials that you have. If you've worked with, individual testimonials are great. Also, if you've worked with other restaurants or caterers or health food stores and you're able to get a little quote or testimonial from them, that's very helpful and also lends to your credibility. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the first element, the cover letter or your pitch letter. And this is where your ask is going to be. And it's also going to be a quick overview of your business. It's really important to make sure that it's concise and that you're using bullets, bold any essential information. People, we're sort of in this sort of ADD scenario where people just don't have time and they lose interest quickly because we're inundated with so many things. So you want to make sure that you get the essential points to them as quickly as possible in case they're not able to read the rest of your letter. In terms of your ask, think about your elevator speech, and that's something that all of you should, and I didn't actually put that in here because it's not an actual piece of media, but it's very important because it's something that you want to be able to get out quickly to a potential customer. In 30 seconds or less, what is your operation and what do you provide? And if you can include in there how it will benefit them, even better. Of course, your logo should be included in your cover letter, and any other branding you have, particular, fonts and colors. We'll talk about that in a moment. Photos from your farm or photos of your product would be very helpful. Again, you want something to help draw people's eyes throughout the page, so that's extremely important, and also to break up a lot of the text space. Make sure you have your contact information on there, your name, address, email, phone number. Social media links are great to have as long as they don't clutter your letter. You can also just include the social media platform icons, just the Facebook icon, the Twitter icon, these very generic icons, so that they know you participate in those particular platforms, and then they can just go and find you themselves. A website link, extremely important. That's going to be your biggest piece, is your website, making sure that you have that link in there that can direct them to your website where they can go for more information is very important. And also, if you have an email newsletter sign-up link, feel free to include that just so they know they can follow you and get more information about your product, and let them know what sort of benefits there are to signing up to, for their newsletter. You might be including, certain discounts or, product updates as they come along if you have a new product coming out. We'll talk about email newsletters a little bit later. And again, as I mentioned, a testimonial or even what they call a pull quote, and that's when you take a particular quote, I guess, and you put it in a larger text box so it really stands out. So that's something that's nice to use in your cover letter or your pitch letter. So now let's go into the logo and some considerations. It's really important to think about your logo, and it's okay if your logo changes too, but I would say, you may want to even test your logo out on a few people first, and get a group of, close friends or people that you do business with, other professionals that can give you a really good opinion, maybe other successful business owners that you know. Keep your group small, though, because it can get quite out of hand when you get a lot of varying opinions from people. But if you have, 3 people that you really value your opinion, you can run some ideas by them. The most important thing is to keep it simple. A lot of people get into these flowery, very ornate type logos, And unfortunately, it's very confusing to the eye, even though they're beautiful pieces of artwork. When you go to scale them down, it looks like a hot mess. So it's really important to make sure that you keep your logo simple. Your logo should reflect your products or services. It also needs to reflect your style. And I suggest that people kind of avoid the cliche type logos that, you see them over and over again, and people just kind of flip and flop out, their particular tagline or the name of their operation. So I would avoid those. You might consider custom type. Sometimes that's a great logo. For example, Coca-Cola, they made their entire logo, which is easily recognized by many people just by using a fun font that they worked with other people. Oh, I have the cover letter examples, and that's something that maybe I did not bring them up on this, but what I could do is maybe send that to you guys after this particular session. Or I can chat with Shannon on how we can get you that link later. Thank you for that question. Also, you want to consider how to use negative space wisely. I just wanted to point out two things here. I had never noticed this before, but if you look at the FedEx logo, they use the negative space between the E and the X very well, and I don't know if anyone's ever noticed before, but there's actually an arrow in there, which sort of, gives that sense of, FedEx, they're dynamic, they're on the ball, they're moving. So that's something to think about too. And also, if you look further down here where my little hand is, there's the arrow if you missed that. For Cork and Cow, if you look at that, of course, the steer horns also are the shape of a wine glass. So that's an interesting way to make use of negative space for a logo. And of course, I just want to talk about something that's very simple, but it's so recognizable, and that's our dear Apple logo for Apple Computer, of course. So just thinking about those kinds of things. You don't need anything super fancy. You need something that's strong, something that's simple, and something that reflects you. The other thing I wanted to mention was the double entendre, and again, that's the Cork and Cow, again, does that very nicely because you have the bull horns, of course, that is also a wine glass. So anytime you can do something like that, it really kind of helps make your logo stronger and more interesting. And of course, proportionality. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. In fact, you want some asymmetry in your logo, but you want to make sure that it's proportional. So I mentioned that just because you might want to keep these things in mind when you're working with a graphic designer. If you are, there's also a lot of online logo services. I think there's one called, I'm just throwing this out as an example, not necessarily an endorsement, 99 Designs. I know of someone who has worked with them, and you kind of throw out there generally what you want, and then you have various people that throw back ideas, and then you select one to work with, and it's a little bit more, it's not as expensive, I guess, as working with a traditional designer, but you don't get as much say in your logo. So that's why it's important before you reach out to folks to have some of these ideas and thoughts in your mind, colors and just generally what you want to see reflected in your logo. Of course, one other thing I forgot to mention is you want to make sure that when it's in black and white, it looks good as well, because we don't always have the opportunity to have these things in color. So making sure that when it's scaled larger or smaller, it looks great, and also when it's black or white, it looks good too. Okay, so now moving on to the business card. So a business card is where you're going to, basically display the key elements of your business. Logo and branding is very important on your business card. So once you kind of have a sense of what that is and what that looks like, you're going to want to use that in your business card. And when we're talking about branding, we're talking about other things such as your fonts, any colors you may use, images. It's just a collection of things, items that you're going to use in order to reflect your business on both print and digital media. You want to make sure you put your contact information on there. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten business cards that have no contact information. It may have a link to a website, which is helpful, but sometimes if I don't have time to look up the website and then go find the contact me page and all of that, I get very frustrated and then I put it off. So making sure that you have at a minimum, your phone and email, it's very important. And I hope most of you guys have email. But if you don't have, email, consider getting one, because that's really a quick way for people to get in touch with you. I know sometimes I wish I didn't have an email account anymore because you get so inundated, but it really is important to have that and your phone number. And I have another question from Jane about copyright infringement. In terms of that, if you're working with a good graphic designer, they should pretty much know that, and I think they can float their logo ideas around, and there's places where they can check to make sure it's not an infringement. I know of some places that occasionally that happens, or things are a little bit too similar. I think that's just something that you cross that bridge when you get to it. But mostly, if you're working with a good graphic designer, they're going to be coming up with something fairly original. And the websites I was telling you about, where you can send out particular requests for logo designs, they should be keeping that in mind as well. But that's a very good thing to think about and to check. Okay, let's see. Oh, again, so if you have a position statement or tagline, that might be, take you a little while to work out, and that's okay. You may want to include that on there as well. And finally, if there is room, you could put your social media links, but I wouldn't get too hung up on that. The main thing is to make sure you have that website. Now, something that I've done on business cards in the past for my business, and I've seen other people do it, which I kind of like, is, on the flip side of the business card, that's where you could put some benefits of your particular program or services, or just a couple of bullets about your farm operation, the services that you offer, that kind of thing. So that's another thing to think about. It's a little more expensive to print on the back, but sometimes it's well worth it, because you could put a bright graphic on the back and enlist some of that information. So there you have it. All right. So the next part, and thanks again, Jane, for your question as well. These are good things to keep in mind when we're talking about this, so I appreciate that question. Product fact sheets can be very important when working with retail and wholesale operations. If you're trying to get another business to carry your products, you're really going to have to sell the product. This is just an example I have here of the Aronia Cooperative worked with a particular marketing group to pull together fact sheets to help sell their product in health food stores and other retail outlets. So I just wanted to kind of go through a couple of things that a product fact sheet could include. Because we're talking about food, oftentimes we're talking about health benefits as well. So if anytime you can include a health benefit or any sort of nutritional value that is obviously based in research in your product fact sheet, that's great. You want to put your growing and processing information in there. A lot of people, they may be looking for organic. They may want grain finished instead of grass finished. You may want raw, something that hasn't been cooked in terms of a value-added product. So if it's raw or unfiltered, for example, you want to make sure that that's included. Also, does the product come fresh, dried, flash frozen? Those kinds of things are very important to them. How to use the product is important too. So again, you may not have room for recipes per se in this sheet. You might include those somewhere else. But if you could just put a general thing about, this could be used in, to cook, various, soups, or used easily in salads, and, that kind of thing, or this is great for smoothies. You might just throw something very general or generic in there. And then you could have a link to other recipes on your website within the particular fact sheet. Just let them know that you have more recipes on your website. Finally, you want to make sure that you include any sort of image that goes along with your branding. Again, your logo is very important. And then anything that would kind of help define that it's your particular farm operation, whether it be the product or a nice picture of your farm, that would be very important. And also just be sure to put that link back to your website. It's important to be able to drive folks to your website or your blog if you have one whenever you can. The other thing I just wanted to mention, if it wasn't already apparent, is to really make it visual. Make sure you're using graphs, charts, whatever images you can. Make sure there's color on there. Make sure it's also reproducible black and white, because that's something that the retailer may do. They may just make copies for their clients. They're not their clients, but their clientele. at the store, so you want to make sure that it looks good in black and white as well. And again, use those pull quotes that I had mentioned to talk about some testimonies or testimonials. Uh-oh. I think we've locked up here. Let's see. Sorry, I'm having problems with my trackpad and my mouse today, folks. Okay. The other thing that you're going to want to include is your farm profile. You want to tell your story. People are buying your product because of you, essentially. So you really want to play that up. And I know this is where it tends to be hard because we hate tooting our own horns, but this is really important in terms of selling yourself. And you may talk with someone else that, there may be a particular customer that you have that loves to tell your story. So maybe they could help you write this up and help you see those parts of your operation that you didn't think were unique, for example. You want to make your farm profile very visual. Include images of your farm and your products, and you want to make sure you include in this particular profile how your farm and your product stands out from others that are doing similar things, and maybe even how it complements other things. Include production methods. Any licenses and special certifications. For example, if you're GAP or if you're organic, people may really be interested in those things. Not if you're GAP, but if you're GAP certified or if you're organic certified, people are interested in that. Certified naturally grown, whatever it might be. So definitely, make sure you include that in your farm profile. If you can put a little bit in there about what your customer will experience, when they open up their CSA box or, when they step onto your farm, that's always nice as well. But of course, that could also be told through pictures. If your farm has received any awards or is involved in any community engagement efforts, that's a really important thing to include because it shows how you are part of the community and how involved you are. The other thing that you want to do is include those testimonials from your from your customers, and whether they be, again, your direct CSA members or the other food retailers. So in terms of food samples, those are very popular items to include as a part of your marketing packet. I know we don't necessarily always want to give away things for free, but this is something that really you should do if you're trying to push your product, especially if you have a value-added product. And also, it's an opportunity to show, for example, a retailer what sort of labels and packaging are available, because your label, your packaging, that's really what's going to appeal, unfortunately, to a lot of customers. If we have two similar products on the shelf, our eyes are going to go to the one that's more attractive. Of course, that's very subjective. I understand that, but something that you want to think about when you're working with retail outlets. The other thing is they may want to know, what's going on with your particular item. How does it come? Is it fresh? Is it frozen? Does it come dried? Can you buy it in bulk? How do you want to do that? So it's important for them to see exactly what they're going to be getting. And of course, I think I mentioned this before, recipes and offering in-store demos. These are important components when you are offering food samples. Those kind of go hand in hand as offering that particular demo. Okay. The other thing besides food samples that you might be able to offer are particular coupons and specials. This would be more for probably your direct CSA members, but you can also give it to the farm or the retail outlet to share with their particular customers. Often they have something called, point of sale materials, and so these are things that they could include right by the product, especially if they have they may be willing to put a table out with some samples. They call that more of a passive demo than an actual active in-store demo. They're not probably as successful as the in-store demo, but it's still a way to get the word out about your product, and often folks can put coupons or specials and things like that next to it. If you're able to give free product, that's great too. That's an incentive for people to to work with you and to sign up for your CSA, or even, shop with you at the farmer's market if you have something free, especially if it's something that you're trying to try out. It may just be like a free sample, not like a whole product, although that's possible too. The other thing is for the retail outlets, if you can provide free shipping or delivery, or even working with direct customers, if there's any of those options, or maybe it's free delivery, from the CSA. Some people, incorporate delivery, of course, into their shares, and some folks may add on that particular cost. So depending on what you do, you could market it as such as, it's free delivery, or it's free delivery for a portion of the season. Folks love free swag, whether it's pens, pencils, bags, bandanas, t-shirts, whatever it is. So that's something else to think about. And quantity discounts, of course, are important to retailers and individual clients. And those rewards programs, you buy X number of things. I've seen a lot of these at farmers markets. You buy 12, these would be more for the value-added products, 12 sauces, and then your 13th salsa is free. So there's those kinds of things that you can do too when you're at a particular market. And then, of course, on those coupons, again, you're going to put your logo and things of that nature. And these coupons, if they're used for another special day at the market, make sure they go in the bags, or you hand them out so that they know to come back to you on that particular market date. Okay, so let's get into the product and price list. This is going to be, everyone's going to want to know what of course, your product and price list is, but this is really important to include in your marketing kit for those retailer and wholesaler options. And it may be, you may have obviously different price lists depending on with whom you're working, retail versus wholesale. So you're going to want to include the types of products, the description of products. Think about, again, an elevator speech for each product, something very short. A price, obviously, and you're going to want to include a date range, because if someone gets a hold of an old price sheet and they say, well, it says here that we're offering, for example, the Delmonico for $20.95 a pound, and it's gone up since then you're sort of beholden to that price. So it's always good to include a date range. This is good through, for example, July 2016. This way you can continue to update it. Quantity discounts are important to include. Will they get a discount if they order in volume, and what would that volume look like? Again, what are the payment terms and conditions? Excuse me. Outline the forms of payment. What's the payment schedule? Are there any deposits required? All of those things are important. And also, how will delivery work? When do you deliver? How much is delivery? And if, just working all of that out with the particular retailer is very important, and also for your individual customers where it's appropriate. And you can see here's an example of a price list, and there's all the important information is there. We have the logo, we have the payment terms down here. There's a little footnote over here, so that's you might need to include some of those if there's special exceptions on your worksheet. And of course, there's all the relevant contact information up here. And this QR code here, this probably goes, I forgot to check this, but I'm assuming this goes directly to their website. So that's something that's really easy for you to create as well, one of those QR codes. And I believe it is free still to do that. All right, so let's just wrap up some key presentation points, and then I'm going to briefly go into social media, which also is part of, even though it may not be in a physical kit that you're going to hand to someone, it's part of your profile, it's part of your marketing kit and your presentation of your farm. But I know we could spend probably 2 or 3 sessions at least just on social media. So I'm just going to give you some quick points on those. But wrapping up, again, just the marketing kit portion, again, making your style and message consistent is very important. It needs to reflect you. Don't try to be someone else. Be authentic. Also, your materials should be, transparent. Just be as honest as possible with what you can provide and what your farm does. Think of your marketing kit as a relationship building tool, and it helps to educate your clients. You're going to be an expert in your particular product and your way of doing things. So, people are coming to you for that particular expertise. They want you for that particular reason. And same thing with when you're working with, retail and wholesale. They're using you as a way to educate them and also their clients on these types of products. In addition to the relationship building tool, or I guess I should say as part of the relationship building tool, you're also going to use this to help build credibility and referrals, which are very important. And when you're marketing, again, I'd like to focus on what we call content marketing, and that is the art of communicating with your customers and prospects without selling. And that's the kind of marketing I like to do. It's more like you're educating, you're informing, your relationship building. So you're not doing a salesy, what we would, put in quotes, a traditional salesy pitch. You're actually delivering information that makes your buyer more intelligent, more confident in working with you. The theory is that if your business delivers consistent, ongoing, valuable information to your buyers, you ultimately reward the buyer will ultimately reward your company with business and loyalty. It's nice. It just gives your business credibility, and it multiplies out from there. So any general questions about the marketing kit before we move into some social media tools that could be used as part of it? Okay, so the reason why I mention social media as part of the marketing kit is because of this very statistic. More than 50% of adult internet users are on 2 or more social media sites, and that figure is growing. And the nice thing about social media is if you don't have time to constantly update your website, which if you can, that's great. People like to see dynamic websites, but I know that's a challenge sometimes for us, especially if we're limited on staff and time. So sometimes social media can be a quick way to do that. And even directing people sometimes to your social media account can be more effective. It just depends on how you're set up. So that's why I like to talk briefly about social media when we're talking about marketing kits. It's a great tool for providing, again, valuable content to gain the trust of your target market. Some of the statistics are as follows. If you look at the percentage of adults that are online users and what social media platforms they've been using, this was a survey that was done last year. I don't have the recent one. But look, 72% are on Facebook. Pinterest is right behind it. Instagram is starting to explode. So I know that these numbers are off, and there's probably even a greater percentage of adults who are now using Instagram. It's popular with a younger crowd, but it's gaining popularity with more and more folks. And LinkedIn and Twitter are also possibilities. Twitter's a little more, ephemeral. It's there for the moment, but it's actually really good if you have an event and you're trying to document the event as it goes and start a conversation. And LinkedIn has a bunch of great groups, networking groups that you can use. I'm going to skip this slide for the moment and just go into overall best practices for social media. Again, a lot of it is going to look familiar from what we spoke about before with the marketing kit. It's knowing your audience. It's developing a unique, authentic voice and being that expert. You want to make sure you mix up educational posts with some cultural, just for fun type posts. You don't want it to be all business all the time because it lets people know that they're humans, on the other side of that keyboard. You're going to use a variety of content, including original and user-generated. And what we mean by that is, content that you develop yourself, but then also content that was developed by other people. We see it all the time. People are constantly sharing other people's work, and that's, a great way to deliver information to your clientele that relates to your business without doing a lot of extra work. Just make sure you're giving credit, that's all. You're going to use those hashtags and handles. We don't have time to talk about that today, but that's something just to note and keep in mind because that helps expand your social media impact. Be consistent with posting. And I always tell people it's much better if you have 1 or 2 forms of social media that you're consistent on, that you use well, than having 5 or 6 that you use poorly and don't get to most of the time. People really like images and videos, so use those when you can. And make sure those are optimized for desktop and mobile. That's another thing. You have to respond to your fans and your haters, unfortunately, in a timely manner, and be positive when you're responding to people who've had a bad experience. Make it right for them, make it positive for them, because other people will look at that and they'll say, oh, look, they're really committed to making it right. They're really committed to their customers. If you can, get some professional photos taken, headshots of you, your crew, your products, and your farm. If you can do that, that will go a long way in terms of helping to bolster your marketing kit and your package, and use them everywhere. Okay, I have this little video, and Shannon, I think we're just going to do a second or two of it. because I know we're running close on time. This video in particular is an example of how you can use your unique style to get across. For example, this is a CSA share and some of the things that are available in this particular CSA's box this week. So they got tired of just listing, the different fruits and vegetables that people will receive. Now I'm trying to think, do I have to mute? Well, you can't hear the jazzy music, but there's some fun little jazzy music, or maybe you can and I just can't hear it. But you can see they put like googly eyes on the cabbage, and they've just literally scribbled on a piece of paper to give it a backdrop. And look, we have the rosemary and the potato. So again, this is funny because yesterday Shannon and I, we were doing a little practice and we couldn't get the darn music to shut up, and now we can't get it to play. I love that. Then you see the little cherry tomatoes coming by. So again, I mean, this is a fun, unique way of, giving your CSA list out. Granted, you wouldn't have time to do this every week, but throwing something in here, throwing something in there now and again, a little curveball, it just gives you personality, gives you some style points to, with your clientele, and gives them a good laugh, because Lord knows we all could use a good laugh on occasion. So anyway, thanks so much, Shannon, for sharing that. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention is with your social media, you kind of need a social media management plan. I'm not going to go into this too much right now because we're almost out of time, and I know there may be some questions, but it's just really important to think about a strategy for how you're going to do this. Look at where your target market is most, and that's a good social media platform to start with. If you're not sure, just choose one or two that you find most appealing, as I had mentioned. And you can even find a social media whiz to help you. I'm sure some of your customers would help volunteer do this for you. I've seen that happen before. And the social media plan, really includes you being intentional about putting some time aside each day. It doesn't have to be much time just to create posts. Or it might be once a week you create posts and set them up for the entire week, or even 2 weeks. You can do this, when you go on vacation. There's social media management systems like Hootsuite, TweetDeck, those kinds of things, where you can pre-populate things. And even Facebook lets you pre-populate posts now, and I think Twitter does too, right on in their particular platform, rather than having to go through a social media management system. But I will say that Hootsuite is free, and I think you have up to 5 particular platforms that you can use, so I highly recommend you check it out, because it will save you time and energy and headaches. Last but not least, email marketing can be really important because it allows you to deliver valuable content right into someone's email box. And many times these we call email marketing applications help you automatically post your newsletter on your social media. So I have a couple of things there that you can consider when doing an email. The most important thing is be brief. If you have a longer article, you can just have a link over to perhaps a blog that you're working on, or maybe even a longer Facebook post, something along those lines. But you just really want to have the highlights in your newsletter, because people really get distracted and lose interest very easily, unfortunately. You're competing with so many other emails. There's a variety of professional email services that are really helpful. So if you're going to be doing this on a regular basis, I suggest you go with one of them. There's Constant Contact. MailChimp is free for up to 2,000 subscribers, so that's a nice one to start with to see if you're actually going to be able to commit the time to do it. There's another one called Emma, so I highly recommend checking something like that out, because it will help to make your it's a way for you to use your branding and to get people, to direct the people to your website, your blog, your social media, and inform them really about what it is that you're doing on your farm and anything new that's up and coming. So that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for hanging on and hanging tight. And Shannon, thanks for getting that video up there.
Thank you for watching our archived presentation of our Wednesday webinar. If you would like to see more archived Wednesday webinars, please visit our YouTube channel. Or to find a schedule of upcoming live webinars, visit our website.